if you look at the white paper is pretty clear that it's a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. That's really what the white paper says. And then when it, I'm not going to say failed, but when it became too slow and too expensive to be a pure vanilla peer-to-peer electronic system, the community created a new narrative, and the new narrative was around, well, Bitcoin is a digital gold, which I must say, if you look at the structure and the design of Bitcoin, then it does make more sense for it to be a digital gold than it is as a competitor to Visa and MasterCard. Specifically, when you overlay crypto regulation or tax regulation over it, and you say, well, every time that you spend Bitcoin at a Starbucks, hypothetically, effectively that's a taxable transaction. And so when you take all those factors together, we've created this narrative that Bitcoin is actually a digital gold. And to be honest, it's a very good narrative given the design of Bitcoin, the limited supply, the predictable inflation rate, the less than optimal transaction times. Yeah, it makes perfect sense that Bitcoin should be a digital gold. But one of the big properties of gold is that gold is really a counter-cyclical asset or a non-correlated asset. And that if you track gold historically, for the most part, gold hasn't been correlated to equities. And one of the biggest use cases of gold, if you can call it a use case, is that it's where investors run to as a safe haven. They run to gold as a safe haven when equities look like they're going to collapse, when there's a turmoil. It's seen as the best option to run to, one of the best options to run to. And so our hope is that Bitcoin becomes this digital gold, or that Bitcoin replaces this digital gold, the gold with the digital version of gold. But the evidence in times of this financial crisis point otherwise. What they show is that not only is Bitcoin correlated, but actually Bitcoin is very, very correlated in times of financial hardship or political disarray. What we've seen is that
for short. I mean, I agree with you, but this is just for a short period. We're just looking at a few weeks here, right? Of this kind of correlation. I think we're at an all-time high 30-day correlation.
Well, yes and no, and let me tell you why I say that. The reason why your argument does hold some substance is that we've tested Bitcoin theoretically from say 2010 or 2011 to 2019. And if you look at the period of 2010 or 2011 to 2019, in essence, equities have been in a raging bull market. In fact, not only a raging bull market, but the biggest bull market in history. And in that bull market, we can conclude that while Bitcoin has been going up, having its biggest bull market in history as a VC type asset or as a new type of asset, and the markets go up, we found that there hasn't been a great correlation. But correlation cannot be measured in one market state alone. The reason why gold is, why investors are confident that gold is a non-correlated asset or a less correlated asset is because it's been tested over multiple financial scenarios, and over multiple financial scenarios, which include bull runs, bear runs, market crashes, political disarray, financial collapses, gold has shown some kind of performance. Ironically, if you look at gold, when this bear market started or when this collapse started, gold was trading
I'm sorry just to stop you, and I want to hear you, but also I want to get more folks on the call because I think what you're talking about is super interesting. And I would just ask if everybody on the call, one of the programs that we're going to institute don't have quite ready at launch, but will very shortly, is we're partnered with NFT.cred, and we're going to be giving out NFTs to the people who join the call. I wasn't planning on doing this now, but what I'll say is this will be the first NFT that we generate. So and we don't have the emails of the folks on the call because there's just a link. So if anybody wants an NFT, or even if you don't, you just think that this is worthwhile, if anybody on the call tweets, hey, I'm on a call, send a link with Ran, Crypto Man Ran, and @Lou Kerner, I'll go back and look at those tweets, look at those mentions, and issue you guys NFTs representing your attendance at this call. And the hope is that'll accrue value over time. So let's continue.
Yeah, so I think going back to it, what I was saying is if we look at the performance of major assets from this collapse, we noticed that gold went into this collapse at about a level of $1,500 or $1,550, depending on when you deem the collapse to have happened. Today, gold is trading at $1,650 or somewhere along those lines. So we're in a position now where we see that gold has maintained its non-correlated status. If you look at Bitcoin came into this crisis at about 8,800, and it traded all the way down to, I didn't see the low, but it traded very low. And today it's trading at about 6,500. Ironically, if you look at Bitcoin today and you look at the markets today, they're probably up more or less the same. And so what we see is that unlike gold, for example, which is truly a non-correlated asset, Bitcoin is, in times of financial crisis, a risk-off asset like equities are. So what we can conclude is that in this financial collapse, so far, Bitcoin hasn't been a digital gold. But not all is lost. And I'll tell you why I think not all is lost. I think we need to understand the reasons why Bitcoin hasn't been acting as a non-correlated asset. And I think there are multiple reasons why this has been the case. I think the first one is that there's not enough adoption of Bitcoin yet. There's not enough institutional adoption and not enough institutional players that are in it who are offering it to their clients as a viable option. Because like I say, by design, Bitcoin is the most logical option to be moving all your money into now. But that is a function of adoption. The second part of it is that Bitcoin is still a very young asset. And you can say that being a very young asset, it's still in the venture part of its life. Now, we know that in times of economic collapse, people take their money off the riskiest things first. And Bitcoin may still be seen to be this risky thing. The third point is, and for me, the most important point actually, is that the reason why I think it's non-correlated is because we're not in the depth of the financial crisis yet. And I think what governments are doing today, if you look at all these bills, feeding trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars into economies around the world, what governments are doing or central banks are doing today is they are devaluing their own currencies. And I think right now people are thinking about survival, but the virus is going to pass and then we're all going to survive, but then there's going to be a whole lot more. Say again?
I said, are you sure about that the virus will pass? Right? They say it's going to hang around and hang around and hang around, but in any case, I'm sorry, go on.
The virus, for all intents and purposes, is going to be as common as a flu going forward. The way I see it, this is the first of many viruses which is going to be airborne and affect us. And governments are now experimenting in how to handle these kind of situations. I think the first experiment has gone horribly wrong. As you can see, they've had to shut down economies to fend off a virus. That's not a sustainable long-term solution for dealing with viruses. And we can get into a different discussion about how they probably should have dealt with it. And I'm not sure I'm the most qualified person to answer that. But what happens when this virus ends is that the realization of what the steps and measures that they took to try and stabilize the economy are all going to become real. And all they have done is they have given us more money in the system and effectively devalued money and currency as a whole. And the things which will eventually hold on to their value are things like possibly property, good businesses, gold, and of course, most logically should be Bitcoin. And my feeling is that now we're all in this panic and no one knows where to look and we don't know when this thing's going to end, and all this uncertainty says to us, just be in cash, just have cash, because you don't know if you're going to be able to buy food tomorrow. But what's going to happen when the dust settles is the economic realities are going to sink in. And I don't think that they are very good realities. In fact, those realities are what Bitcoin was designed to do. And so that may be when Bitcoin thrives.
And you think at like a tipping point, do you think this, I mean, there were some people, including myself, quite honestly, who would have thought, gosh, this is what Bitcoin was born for. And I appreciate that at first you get the, in a liquidity crisis, everybody goes to cash and everything goes down, including gold. But actually, if you go back to the 2008 crisis, gold started actually separating from equities in 2007. So it seemed that, people were already starting to de-risk, and go to gold. And so it's just, not sure kind of when that's, what's your timeline for when you think that's going to happen? And by the way, it was 3 years. Over the next 3 years, gold was up from when it started decoupling in 07, 180% over the next 3 years, while the market from the time that it separated was down 20% over those 3 years. So that's a 200% outperformance.
Let's look at the cycle of 07, 08, and I remember it like it was yesterday because this financial crisis has triggered exactly the same emotions. But if you look at the cycle of 07, 08, when the crack started to show, people started to move into gold. When people realized that there was so much financial stimulus in the market.
But the market kept on going up, interestingly, right? I mean, it went up another about 6 months from the decoupling.
Well, that's not very different from what we saw now. I mean, if you look at gold, a couple of months before this market collapse, people started to move into gold. And everyone was going, Peter Schiff was getting very excited. I remember him mentioning on Twitter once that there was an astronomical 1% move in gold the one day. But it's not very different from what's happening now. I think the cycle is just playing itself out again. I think that Bitcoin is a little baby in this equation. And I think that it just needs time. And I think that this is good. I think what's going on now is good. Bitcoin is an available item on the menu, even though some people haven't bought into tasting it yet. It's an available item on the menu. And I'm sure that some investment advisors are actually talking about moving some of their clients probably 80% into gold and maybe 20% into Bitcoin, or 90% into gold and 10% into Bitcoin when it comes into a safe haven. And that's going to be a cycle which is going to take multiple years. I don't think that we can expect Bitcoin to replace gold immediately.
Do you, when people ask you about, Bitcoin, how do I buy it? How do you suggest people even buy it?
Well, that's another one of the issues. And I faced this issue myself the other day where Bitcoin price collapsed. I didn't have any money on exchanges. And so I found, the problem is that, I don't remember exactly what the level was, but it collapsed to like quite a low level, I think in the 4,000s or something. And I wanted to buy more. The problem is I didn't have any money on any of the exchanges. And then the problem is that you have to get money into your OTC account or into your exchange account. And, that can take a day, maybe 2, maybe 3. And by that time, you've missed the trading bottom. With equities, either you've got your Interactive Broker account or your Schwab account or whatever it is, which is linked to your bank account and almost immediate, or you've got a banker that you can pick up the phone to and say, hey, buy this for me because you're holding all my other assets. And so either way, there's a much quicker entrance into other assets. So I think the roads and the access isn't yet quite there yet for quick, frictionless transactions.
And so again, people say, great, I want to buy Bitcoin. What do you tell them to do?
I tell them depends who they are and what I think their technical capabilities are and their ability to back up a seed phrase or to store their private key safely. But
that's it. Well, that's pretty low. If they know how to do that, they're probably not asking you.
Yes, exactly. So then, my feeling is, the way I said is pick a reputable exchange and buy it on a reputable exchange, a Coinbase, a Binance, a Huobi, whatever. Find an exchange that you trust in your jurisdiction that has fiat on-ramps and off-ramps. And for beginners, I would recommend buying on the exchanges. And I'd even recommend, and I know as a crypto person, we shouldn't be advocating for, people to get their coins off an exchange. But I do feel that for a beginner, the coins are better on the exchange than in your own hands. I've had many a phone call from people who've lost their private keys, don't remember their backup phrases, didn't realize they had to store them, thought that they could call somebody one day to help them retrieve it. And we all know how that ends. Yes. So I think if you're a beginner, and you want to get into the space, find a reputable exchange and buy on a reputable exchange. Yeah.
What about, I mean, quite honestly, and I actually do not consider myself in any way an expert. I know myself, you know, I opened up an account on Coinbase. You know, I mean, I generally store my own coins. I got a account on Coinbase just so I could experience it. And because, you know, as a result of me being SIM swapped 15 times so far, at some point, you know, and I put my Coinbase information there. And so, you know, it was hacked and it was all stolen. And I have never, you know, that was, you know, more than a year ago now, and it was a couple $100, so not a huge deal. But what shocked me was after that happened, and I emailed Coinbase, and I emailed Coinbase again, and I emailed Coinbase again, and, you know, and I never ever you know, more than a year later, have not gotten any response ever from Coinbase, which is remarkable. So I struggle to send people to Coinbase. So I don't even know what, you know, because they're obviously the most reputable, and obviously you've heard this same story again and again and again from people. So is there somebody that you actually consider, I mean, they're reputable, but they still kind of suck?
So I don't know how familiar you are with the gaming industry and the affiliate programs that gaming industries run, but there's a whole business around affiliates or people that introduce people to gaming websites.
Yes.
And these people bet their credibility on it. And so what I think is happening and will happen more and more is that they'll become aggregators of exchanges for people. And they will rate exchanges based on things that are important to people. Now, for me, the most important thing about an exchange is the fact that they're big and that they could survive a potential breach or a hack. The reason for that is because we're still in the place where breaches and hacks are possible. We haven't yet 100% sealed that off. And you want to make sure that the exchange is reputable when it comes to that. Then the next thing for me is liquidity, the ability to trade. And the third thing for me is customer service. And, you know, I don't have many experiences with Coinbase, but I can tell you that, you know, in some of my dealings with Binance, they've been pretty good. My experiences with exchanges like KuCoin and Huobi have been very good. So I think, you know, gone are the days where exchanges are closing themselves off to business because they have so many signups and they can't keep up. I think now the balance is shifting to consumers. It will become a consumer-driven market, and exchanges that don't get back to their clients within, you know, would you bank with your bank if your bank didn't get back if your bank didn't get back to you after a year? You wouldn't, and that's what's going to happen with exchanges.
Yeah, hard to imagine not. So we've got some questions from the audience, and I've unmuted. Trying to pronounce the name Isak. I've unmuted you, but your mute might still be on. So you can talk if you turn on your computer. But the question was, global resident provider, let's see, during the sort of, they should practice taking small amounts in and out of exchange. Oh, that's interesting. I guess it was more of a comment than a question.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And to be honest, when I do talks around Bitcoin,
I'm not leaving. I'm just going to get another beer. I'll be back in a moment. I can still hear you.
I didn't know we could open beers, but okay. I'm saying, look, I think that's a great idea. And every time that I do talks to audiences, the first thing I say is I actually send them a Bitcoin, or I get them to buy some Bitcoin and experiment getting it in and out, and closing their wallet, opening their wallet, having to utilize the private key, etc., etc. I think that's a fair and responsible approach to anyone who wants to get in the game.
Okay, so let's talk about what else are you excited about in the space?
So to be honest, I'm very excited because I think our bear market preempted the current equity bear market. So I think we've seen the worst of our bear market. And I think that the bear market shook off all the weak hands and a lot of the people that were here for the wrong reasons. And I'm excited because, you know, the general level and caliber of person in the space and deal in the space is now much higher. And so excited to be now in a space where we're not wasting time on scammers and, you know, flawed business models, and we're spending much more time on on things with substance.
And so what things with substance are you most excited about?
So I think if you follow the internet boom, bust, and then boom again in 98, 2000, 2001.
I started first startup in January, 3 months before the bust, and I feel now I got into crypto 6 months before the bust, so I'm getting better.
Okay, well, yeah. So I was there. Yeah, I was there 2 years before the bust, and I think I was since 2015. The pattern is exactly the same, and what you're realizing is that the big chains and the big companies have got a higher chance of success, and there will be some big companies that fail or big chains that fail, and there will be some small ones that surprise us. But for all intents and purposes, if you think about it like a race, like a cycling race, the bunch in the front has already broken away from the pack. And now it's a case of, those guys will battle to become the Googles and the Amazons, and some of them will die, like, all the big internet companies that died, America Online and all those, AOL and those guys.
Yeah, one of the questions we got is, I get, in part, I guess, because of the shirt that I have on, is Tezos. Do you have any views on Tezos? So
Tezos has actually surprised me quite a bit. I must say for the record that I am a token holder of Tezos, as I have been for, I think, since they came onto the market. I don't think I've ever sold a Tezos token. They've surprised me, and the reason they surprised me is because it wasn't one of these big fanatic communities like Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash or BSV, with these loud communities, until recently when the price started to spike. And then all these like in the closet Tezos fans started to come out, and it actually like built this movement. And I think it's done it without like the cheap hype, if you know what I'm saying. And I've yet to see amazing stuff come out of Tezos, but I think they're certainly on the right track.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, for a lot of people on the call don't know me, but my whole thing is community. So I really believe that the difference between crypto and everything that came before crypto is the importance of community. And so for me, when I went to T-Quorum in Paris, during Paris Blockchain Week in 2018, they had a community there, and it was interesting. But in New York, 6 months later, they had the next T-Quorum, and it was completely and totally different. And that is when I became a huge fan, because they have a community. After Bitcoin and Ethereum, there are other communities out there that are really based on the price of the token, and that is not a community. There should be another word for it. A community is somebody who's there with you during thick and thin. And that's how you build a thing. If people are there just for the ride up, because there's going to be ride down, then during the ride down, the community goes away, and that's not a community. And I really think Tezos has a community, and I think that they're doing some super interesting stuff around security tokens and in other areas that are leveraging, their strengths around security and privacy.
Yeah, so I mean, I have a thesis about this community thing. I think that we've seen multiple waves of blockchain, but if you look at the last wave of blockchain, was around technology. So, people were talking about TPS. I don't know, I mean, that was a year and a half ago, but everyone was obsessed with this thing called TPS. And the discussions that we had back then were discussions around decentralization versus security versus speed, and the trilemma and all that. People don't talk about that anymore. And the reason for that is because I think we've entered a new stage in blockchain development, and this stage of blockchain development is actually about what I call activating communities. Now, if you understand the word activating and you understand the word communities, you understand why I feel so strongly about this. So to activate someone means to change the way they act or transact. And what I think needs to happen here is that people need to take a lesson from the big marketers of the world. And if you look at the big marketers of our world, there are two that really stick out. One of them is CZ and the other one is Justin Sun. Now, I don't want to get into whether I respect
No,
or
that's okay.
disrespect.
But I agree with you. I'm trying to think, who else would you put? Is there anybody else to put in that same
So
category?
there's three people in my mind that have done it right. Two of them have done it right very much on purpose, and one has done it right by accident. So the one that's done it right by accident is Vitalik, because I don't think he set out with a marketing agenda, but he was the right person in the right time with the right technology and the right idealisms to attract the community.
Have you
And
ever
then,
gone to an ETH event?
of course, I've been to all the DevCons. I've been to, I think, 3, 4, DevCon 3, DevCon 4, DevCon 5. I've been to multiple ETH Berlins and etc. Now,
I mean, I just went to my first ETH in Denver, and I'm embarrassed because I've gone to lots of conferences, but they were all business conferences. And this isn't an industry really. I mean, it's business is a part of it, but the much bigger and more important part of it today is the dev community, obviously. And I was so blown away by the dev community in Denver. Really,
you have to understand that the way I view activation, and my background is in activation. I mean, I built and sold an activation business before I entered this rabbit hole. But for me, activation comes in multiple phases. So the first thing is you have to activate the investors, because the investors are the lifeblood of keeping the community funded to do cool stuff. Once you've activated investors, then that provides.
You know, I mean, I'm sorry.
Let me finish.
Okay.
So once you've activated the investors, then what you'll realize is that the developers follow suit, because there's now all of a sudden, if you look at Ethereum, there's now all of a sudden these amazing bunch of people that are developing on Ethereum, and there's money in the Ethereum ecosystem. And then the third leg is to activate consumers of the technology to actually use the technology. Those are, for me, the three legs of activation. Now, we can have a discussion as to whether developers come first or whether investors come first. But either way, you've got to activate those two levels to activate the third level, which is the consumer activation. Now, to that end, we came up with a model, and I'll share it quite openly here because I think it's in the spirit of open source. We said that the only way that you can compete today with an Ethereum type of network effect is if you can beat them at activating their communities. And in order to do that, you've got to find catalysts that get the community rallying around the protocol. And we've got a couple of models which do that, but that's really what it's about. The next stage of blockchain development is activation of networks to achieve network effect.
Well, so let's start at the beginning. I would, as an investor, so I've been an investor. I became, you know, I've started angel investing after I sold my first company in 2002. And at that point, you know, investing is so different than operating, and I still wanted to operate. So I ran another company, and then I continued to angel invest. I became a VC in 2012. And, you know, my biggest lesson, quite honestly, as a VC, is that, you know, taking a look at a company, you know, with an idea on a piece of paper and saying that's going to be a big company, I don't actually think that's a thing. You know, other than the team, if you know the team, if you have inside track on the team, that they're incredibly brilliant people, you have some other inside information, but people knocking on your door saying, hey, I've got an idea, and you going, hey, you know what, I'm smarter than everybody else and know a good idea. When I see one, and I say that for multiple reasons, but I think the biggest data point is the fact that the same VCs are in the top decile year after year after year after year after year, and we all know them. They're all the top tier VCs, and you have to ask yourself, are these the people smarter than everybody else? Do they work harder than everybody else? Or what a VC really is, in my view, is somebody who, when they call up the same company everybody else is calling up because something happened and all of a sudden everybody thinks it's next Facebook or Google, they're the ones who get in the deal. And I think that's primarily what I've learned VC is, and that's why I think they come later, because they come when there's something there. And the developers, I think, are smarter about understanding this technology. It's just kind of play that they see that they can build what they want to out of it. And that's what I saw there in East Denver's people are so excited. Now, I agree with you. Obviously, they need money. But but it's hard to come by in frontier tech like this, particularly during down periods like this.
So I think that all protocols are going to need to do a marketing job. And the reason for that is they're going to need to position themselves in the market. You're not going to be able to be everything to everyone. And so if you look at the two successful cases in crypto, and I think that right now there are probably 2.5 successful cases in crypto. But the first one is Bitcoin. And that's because Bitcoin stands for this, libertarian, we hold our own money and it's decentralized and you can't touch it and you can't switch it off. And it's this whole anti-government libertarian movement. And that is one amazing community which has been built around that ethos. Ethereum is the smart contract version of that. We're decentralized, we're for the community. But, there are other chains. Like, again, I'm going to use the example of Tron. But Tron doesn't claim to be the most decentralized, or EOS don't claim to be the most decentralized bunch of people in the world. If you as a developer are willing to live with those ideals, or you are a fan of those ideals, then you may find better features, better capital in one of those buckets. And that's kind of like where my headspace is at. Protocols are going to have to position themselves based on the community that they want to attract. And that's where my headspace is.
So, it's interesting because I never really went to Asia before last year, going to Asia for crypto, because it was happening there and it wasn't happening anywhere else. So if you were in crypto, you had to go there to actually get a sense of what was going on. And I was blown away by the ecosystem. I was blown away by Shanghai. I was blown away by Singapore. Oh my God. Taiwan was amazing. CZ was amazing. I got less of a sense of Justin. And I think here in the press, he's largely, if all you do is sit in crypto Twitter and, such, he just gets really vilified here. But there's a much different sense of him. I think there's a more split community at the least in Asia or no.
So very much so. And I think that's natural. If you think about, if I ask you which companies in the East are you a big fan of, you can probably only name 5 real companies. Everyone will tell you, oh, Tencent, and Alibaba. And that, the reason is because if you go to China, then, people in China they've been doing their marketing to different communities. Now, generally, companies have targeted one or the other. The thing with protocols is that protocols are open sourced and they're really for everyone. I'm not going to say too much about my thoughts about Justin, although I must say that I do think that what he's done, he needs to be commended for. I think he's the ultimate marketer, and he's also the ultimate innovator. He's trying things in the space which no one else is trying, and he's, acquisitions of chains, stuff like that. He's, buying exchanges, et cetera. He's doing all these things, and he's pushing the envelope. Now, some of these things may work, and some of these things may fail. And as long as his intentions are pure, and when I say his intentions are pure, I mean to add value to the communities in a transparent and honest way, then we should encourage people to experiment more.
I think that I could not agree with you more, right? One of the things I'm still surprised at is all the hate there is for Elon Musk. My God, who's done more for humanity, and is more forward thinking, and in 100 years unimaginable he won't be the Edison of our day. And yet there's still a wide swath of America and the world that hates him.
You know what, the way I see it, the way I've realized, unfortunately, is that sometimes the community is so fickle that hate is a function of your price. So Elon Musk, many people said that he is the devil when Tesla was trading at 100 and 120 and 200. When Tesla went to 900 or 1,000, he was the biggest hero in the world. Now, if you take that as a litmus test around crypto, many people who were loved in the bull market are hated in the bear market. And so I think people are projecting their frustration around price, around the figurehead. And yes, again, I'm going back to Justin Sun. I don't want to be this podcast to be about him, but You take a guy like that. And you say,
Sun show in a half hour every week. We can hang out and have people come on. People who watch that show it was about Elon.
You got to take your hat off to him. He's done stuff that other people haven't done and haven't even thought of. He's done it on a very big scale. He's done it at a very young age. He's done wonders for
I got to agree with you, and I swear I have not really thought of it in that context. Which, you know, when I went, before I got into crypto, I was 24/7. I was investing in tech companies founded by Israelis, and so I was going to Israel every quarter, which is amazing. And then, you know, and then I just continued going when I got into crypto, because obviously Israel is crypto crazy, right? And you know, and they have their own cast of characters, a lot of OGs there, and most notably, I don't know if you ever run across a guy, Moshe Hageg.
I know him very well. Very well.
Yeah, and there's a guy. I mean, you know, he's kind of the Justin son of Israel. And I mean, I wouldn't put him in that category. I'd put him as somebody, just in terms of the controversy that he raises, right?
You know, I must say I have a very good relationship with Moshe. I've had multiple dealings with him, and every single one of the dealings has been great and in good faith and in transparency and honesty. And I can't flaw him on that. I think, you know, whether or not, I know there's a lot of accusations against him, and of course I can't answer as to whether or not, you know, those are true or not. But I do think that he comes under a lot of flack, as does anyone who's innovating and anyone who's pushing boundaries.
Yes, exactly.
You know,
yes.
And yeah, again, I want to just.
That's why I brought him up. And look, and again, I obviously, I don't know what he's done or not. I realize people have strong feelings, and who am I from the US? But, you know, when he actually reached out to me, and and people said, oh my God, don't. And then I kept on going, and, you know, to Israel and going deeper. And I feel the same way. I never, every interaction I had with him was positive. Is, he, but in any case, he's another guy, I think, and they run all types. Did you see the Theranos movie, by the way?
No, I haven't.
The story that the Theranos movie told, which I thought was amazing, was that she was the present day Thomas Edison, and the only difference between her and Thomas Edison was Edison, after line and line and line and line and line, figured it out.
Yeah, look, again, for me, I mean, yeah, I think people are judged. You know, the problem is that the communication ground on Twitter, for crypto, is on Twitter. And on Twitter, people hide behind 280 characters and avatars, you know, not knowing who they are. And it's very easy for me to knock you down, and knowing that there's never going to be any consequence, and you're probably never going to really know who I am. You know, having been in the limelight myself and been in the public myself, I know how the mentality is, and I know how fickle people are and how quickly they are to judge, and also how quickly they are to change their judgment. I mean, I've gone from being a genius to being, I don't know, a scammer, to being a genius again in sometimes in the span of 2 minutes. You know, so I think I think the bigger things you're doing, the more people you're going to rattle, and you know, I think a lot of people in this industry are set in their ways, and that's good for them. Each to his own. I've got a much more open view. I think that we should be experimenting. I think that we're a very young industry, and that I will always support open, honest innovation or disruption, as long as the people that are doing it with integrity and with the community's best interests at heart.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think one of the realizations that I've come to is, you know, community, like everything, is a double-edged sword. And the hatred that and vitriol that is a part of any community, big or small, it's part of human nature. I have come to, if I accept that this is all about community, then I've got to accept that as a feature and not a bug. because that's not going away. And if I'm taking community, then I'm taking that as well. And it is what it is. And everybody can decide how they want to deal with it. How I deal with it is, I just, there's a great, my favorite poem is If by Rudyard Kipling. And one of the great lines, so if you do all these things and you're a man, my son, and it starts, if you can keep your head well, all about you are losing theirs and blame that on you. And one of the lines is, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat both imposters just the same.
Yeah. So, I mean, I apply two very distinct principles. The first one for me is you're always innocent until proven guilty. And I really mean that. I try and see the good in people. At the same time, there's a saying in Hebrew, which you may know. I know you speak Hebrew, but it's kabdeu v'chashdehu, which means respect him and suspect him. And that's exactly what my thing is. I respect everyone and give them the benefit of a doubt, but at the same time, I always suspect and doubt and ask the right questions. And I think that, being in crypto through 2016, 2017, 2018, all of us were involved in one scam or another in terms of putting our money into a not so kosher operation at some point. And I think it just made me smarter and made me ask the right questions. And I want to give you a great example of when it dawned on me that I'd really learned from my mistakes. In the old days, in the 2017 days, before I made an investment, and I'm going to use a number here just as an illustrative number, but before I made $100,000 investment in a crypto project, I wouldn't even read the white paper. Someone would forward it to me. They would tell me it's 100 times oversubscribed, and bang, take my money. Now, before I do $100,000 deal, I could put the founders through 3 weeks of a due diligence. And so we learn from our mistakes. And I'm sure that we all have war stories. We all have these mistakes. I hope, like me, that most people have taken a lesson and can call on themselves to account for taking that lesson. And it's made us stronger. It's weeded out the scammers, because money is not that easy to come by anymore in this industry.
Yes, no, those are all great points. I mean, the story you just told, I mean, I have that, same exact story, but from 20 years ago. When I was, the market, the internet market, I mean, it was crazy, and that was all public. And so I have a word that I use to describe the tendency of markets to become bubbles and crash and become bubbles again. The word that I think perfectly captures that is capitalism. Right. And that's all it is. It just goes from, and some would have you believe, right. And there was a lot of, hey, the government's figured out how to not have that be a thing anymore. And there's a great book, 600 Years of This Time It's Different, when it never is.
Yeah. It's never going to be different. And that's why I think that equities are presenting a very good opportunity now. I think that everyone's panicking, and we kind of know how this movie goes. They may see a bear market, but in time, Boeing will survive, and American Airlines will survive, and all the petrol companies will survive, and it'll be okay.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, the only caveat I would say to that, and I agree with you, it is going to be okay. You know how long it took to get back to where they were after 29?
4 years? So no, 54. So 30 years. 30 years, right?
It's 27 years. Yeah. Very good guess. Yeah, 27 years.
Yeah. So yes, but the flow of information then was very slow. If you look at
a much different world, look, everything is its own thing. And by the way, we look at like only a couple things to come up with it. So yeah, nobody knows anything, right? But these are all data points.
Let's take an example of 2008, which was arguably one of the most devastating corrections of our lifetimes, because that was a correction where the banking system was absolutely broken. The financial system, which we all trust and love, was absolutely broken. Now, if you take that, by 2012, or I think I'm not sure exactly, but by 2012, we were in the same highs. So you're talking about a 4-year correction versus a 50-year or 30-year correction.
Right.
Um,
But you know what the difference is to me? And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off if you were more. The difference is to me is, I'm very macro. I was an equity analyst on Wall Street for 7 years. That's how I started my career. Last 4 years of following cable and satellite companies at Goldman. And so, and the macro, like the simplistic macro view that I use is what Warren Buffett uses, because, while he doesn't get crypto in terms of macro, he's like pretty good. And he uses something that is now, not surprisingly, called the Buffett Index, which is just simply market cap over GDP. And it was at an all-time high. I mean, it far surpassed 2000 crazy levels. And we're still, even after this fall, in what would be called very overvalued territory per the Buffett Index. So my bearishness is not that this is worse because I don't know anything more about what was, but I can look back and say what was. And where we were, by that, we were very, very, very overvalued. So I think we got a lot of ways to go to even become by that, but who knows?
Who knows? Also, look, they've now putting trillions of dollars into the economy. Ultimately, those trillions of dollars are going to be reflected in share prices, like it or not. So, what devalues is currencies, but what goes up as an absolute number are share prices, equity prices. And so I think, all bets.
I'm like, what's the word for it? Hard asset. What's the word for it? But yeah, I mean, in a world of inflation, right? I mean, Weimar Germany, what most people don't realize is, when that government came in, they had a roaring market for literally about the same amount of time we just had a roaring market before the shit hit the fan.
You were a trader or an analyst. I was once, the only job I've ever had actually was I was a stockbroker. And we used to have a saying when we used to trade, and we used to say, if you try and pick a bottom, you get shit on your finger. And so
that's funny. I like that line. I never heard that.
Yeah. And so what I'm saying is, I'm not trying to pick a bottom. I'm saying that if your time horizon is long-term, markets will continue to go up, and you've now got an opportunity to buy in. Is it going to be the lowest? I don't know, but I can guarantee that, or not guarantee, but in all probability, if your investment horizon is a long-term horizon, it doesn't matter. And I said the same thing about crypto. If you remember in this correction, 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, crypto crashed first. And only the next day did equities crash. And everyone was like, oh my God, Bitcoin's crashing. And I just sat there and thought, okay, so what? We've been through this before. We know that it always recovers. We must just chill and buy more. And that's what I said to you. I tried to buy more, but I didn't have the amount of time it would have taken me to put money into my account, blah, blah, blah. By that time, the opportunity was, in my mind, much less of an opportunity.
But I guess I really do have the view that, maybe I'm more fatalist than you, I guess, that the system is so broken. This idea that we can pump, what I think my favorite riff from the whole Burr thing, which I love Burr, is, this belief that, right? I think, like, what's going to help people understand Bitcoin? And I think, the belief that, hey, if you can just print money to solve your problems, why the fuck do you need to collect taxes? Seriously,
I read,
right? Why do you need to collect taxes if you can just print till the end of time? And if you say, okay, you can't print to the end of time, then the question becomes, well, where is the end of time?
Sorry, yeah. I subscribed. I got, I don't know if it was you, but somebody mailed me or tweeted me with a photo of, printing more money, just keep printing more money, etc. Yeah, I mean, I think that government systems as they are today are completely obsolete. And I think we're going to go through a revolution just as many other generations before us have gone through revolutions. I don't know what it would look like, but I can tell you it's going to be different from where we are today.
You know, I mean, it's funny. I grew up in the 70s, and I always thought, you know, it sucked to grow up in the 70s because the 60s just happened. And oh my God, the 60s rocked and the 70s sucked. And it turned out that the 80s sucked and the 90s sucked and the not sucked. And now I've been saying, I mean, part of my excitement is I really feel like for the first time there's another revolution happening. I don't think revolutions happen very often. And I think that the revolution that's about to come could dwarf what happened in the 60s.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be multiple revolutions. I don't know if the extreme of where we think this Bitcoin revolution is going to go is actually going to happen. Because I think the governments are not going to let go of their fiscal control. You know, governments want to be in control. They want their share. They want to be in control. And I think it's going to be very tough to take that away from them. I think we may have a small alternative for now, but I'm not sure we're going to get this whole revolution.
No, I don't think, look, we're not going to, I mean, look, I don't care, you know, for me, right? We've all got, I don't care. Let the fucking governments do it. The government's going to do what they're going to do. I am not, unfortunately, not going to have any impact over what the U.S. federal government decides what to do. I mean, I'm going to vote, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, so I'm spending my time on the alternative, on you know, what can we create that isn't to replace that, to, you know, but maybe can be a community where we're able to exist, you know, if not all of the time, a lot of the time.
It may not be a revolution. It may just be an evolution. It may be a revolution which takes place over time. I hope so. But although I do know that desperate situations cause people to do desperate things. And I mean, I hate to say it, but I think what the government's doing now by feeding this crisis with money, I understand why they're doing it, because they want people to be able to pay their rents and eat. But I think by printing so much money, I mean, wherever you were yesterday, you're poorer today. Like it or not, you're poorer today.
But we're all poor. Look, we've been broke forever. So it's not like you can't get more broke, right? Do you know who Roy Cohn is?
Yeah.
So Roy Cohn, basically, for those who don't know him, he basically taught Trump everything he knows. If you want to understand Trump, understand Roy Cohn. That was his lawyer. That when they threw Michael Cohen in jail, Trump said, "Oh my God, where's my Roy Cohn?" Like somebody who could really help him. And Roy Cohn, one of his many amazing quotes was, "I want to die poor, owing the IRS millions of dollars." And that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, Lou, I have to go. I've got another call which started 5 minutes ago, and I've been delaying them, but I really have to jump.
That was an interesting conversation. Awesome. Seriously, you taught me a lot. I learned a lot. Thanks.
You taught me a lot too, my friend. Let's chat soon.